Nate is one of the toughest fighters in MMA history. You said you're going to knock him out. How confident are you that you're going to knock him out?
I'm very confident in all the work I've done and my fighting abilities. He looks like he's in great shape from photos and videos I've seen, so I'm ready to have a freaking battle for 5 rounds or 5 seconds. It don't matter.
Nate Diaz looks like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, throwing out one-word answers and complaining about uncomfortable chairs. But don't mistake that for lack of confidence. That's Nate's entire brand. The question is whether that laid-back attitude is real or if it's psychological warfare designed to get under Perry's skin. Because here's what most people missed about this press conference. This wasn't supposed to be the fight. Perry was originally offered a different opponent entirely, and according to multiple sources, he turned it down. The fight that went through instead was Nate Diaz. And that decision is about to become the most controversial part of this entire card.
And it could go anywhere. I know he has a lot of skills when we tie up and things like that. So I'm excited to have a car crash.
Do you share that sentiment, Nathan? Do you want a car crash on Saturday?
Drive safely.
Listen to how Perry frames this. Best shape of his life, ready for a car crash, coming out punching. That's the language of someone who's prepared for violence, but also someone who's trying to convince himself this is the right fight. And there's a reason for that. The boxing world has been whispering about this matchup for weeks, not about who wins or loses, but about whether this fight makes sense for Perry's trajectory. He's 30 wins in kickboxing with 25 knockouts. He's trying to establish himself as a legitimate combat sports crossover star. Taking on a 39-year-old MMA legend who hasn't fought in this format in years should be a showcase fight, an opportunity to make a statement. But watch what happens when someone else enters this conversation, because the real story isn't about Mike Perry or Nate Diaz. It's about the fighter who was supposed to be sitting in that chair instead.
You were supposed to fight me, you didn't want to choose me.
Every name I got offered, I said yeah. And then you got a fight that's more fitting.
Yeah, we all know. Hey, at the end of the day, me and you, we know. You were supposed to fight me, you didn't want to fight me, pretty boy.
Is that true, Mike? Were you offered a fight against them?
And I said yes.
Okay.
And that's not the fight that went through.
No, that's not what I heard. I heard you didn't want to fight.
And they said you got to take a huge pay cut to fight this dumbass nobody with a flat face nose that I would crack in half in an instant.
You got too many punches to your head.
You busy worried about not getting text back by your opponent. You got blocked already. I'm gonna block your ass next, and the rest of the world gonna forget about your dumb ass.
Let me tell you.
And there it is, the moment this press conference went completely off the rails. That's not a random heckler in the crowd. That's a professional fighter calling out Mike Perry in front of everyone, claiming Perry ducked him to take an easier fight with Nate Diaz. And notice Perry's response. He doesn't deny it, he justifies it. I'm 1-0 in boxing. I keep it 100% real. No offense, Nate, but I'm the real deal here. That's not the language of someone who's confident in their decision. That's someone who knows they took the easier path and is trying to rationalize it publicly. Now here's where this gets complicated. In combat sports, there's an unwritten rule about calling out fighters during someone else's press conference. You don't do it unless you have legitimate beef. And this fighter clearly has beef. He's claiming Perry was offered the fight, said yes initially, then backed out when the money got complicated. Perry's version is that he never turned down anyone, that the fight just didn't materialize. But his body language tells a different story.
Doing it for a minute now. In my kickboxing record, I have 34 fights, only 4 losses, 30 wins, 25 knockouts. In MMA, I'm 9-1. The only reason, look, I'm one of a kind.
Nate, do you want to respond to Namo and what he just said? What? Do you want to respond to what he just said? He said that Mike took the easier fight by taking you.
Don't be dragging my name into it.
He brought it up.
Nate is too high to understand anything. I don't understand what he's saying.
Classic Nate. Cryptic, barely coherent, but somehow cutting right to the heart of the issue. He's not offended by the suggestion that he's the easier fight. He's almost amused by it. Then the heckler delivers the knockout line. Nate's just too high to understand anything. The entire room laughs, because that's the Nate Diaz brand. The guy who shows up, doesn't take anything seriously, and somehow still manages to be one of the most respected fighters in combat sports history. But Saturday night, my boy Nate Diaz is going to kick your ass. That's strategic. He's not actually rooting for Nate, he's predicting Perry loses to the easier fight, which would prove his entire point. If Perry can't beat 39-year-old Nate Diaz, how is he ever going to beat a younger, hungrier opponent? The entire controversy that follows reveals that Perry chose this fight specifically because he believed it would go a certain way. Whether that's a knockout, a decision, or just a competitive showcase for his skills, he picked Nate Diaz for a reason. And that reason wasn't because Nate was the toughest available opponent. Here's what makes this situation so complex. In combat sports, fighters have every right to make strategic career decisions. Taking a fight against a legendary name like Nate Diaz makes perfect sense from a business perspective. The pay-per-view numbers, the media attention, the legacy boost of beating a Diaz brother, even at 39 years old, that's all valuable. No one can fault Perry for taking that opportunity. But the problem is the framing. If Perry had come out and said, "Look, Nate's a legend, this is a huge opportunity for me, and yes, I think I can beat him," that would be honest. Instead, he's positioning himself as this fearless warrior ready to fight anyone, while simultaneously turning down tougher opponents. That's where the credibility gap emerges. The heckler in the crowd exposed that gap, and once it's exposed, it can't be hidden again. Every punch Perry throws on Saturday will be analyzed through this lens. If he wins easily, people will say Nate was washed. If it's competitive, people will question why Perry didn't take the harder fight. And if he loses, the narrative becomes that he ducked a real challenge and still couldn't win the easy one. This is the problem with perception in combat sports. It's not enough to win. You have to win the right way against the right opponents at the right time. And Mike Perry, whether he admits it or not, just put himself in a position where even victory might feel like a loss. Think about the pressure that creates. He's walking into that ring, knowing that a significant portion of the audience believes he took the easy path. That's psychological warfare before the first punch is thrown. And Nate Diaz, who's been in this sport for nearly 2 decades, absolutely knows how to exploit that kind of mental weakness. Watch that initial exchange again. Nate's barely paying attention. He's fidgeting, complaining about chairs, giving one-word answers. That's not disrespect to the event. That's a veteran fighter who's been in bigger moments than this and knows that press conference energy doesn't win fights. While Perry's busy defending his record and justifying his choices, Nate's conserving energy and staying loose. The contrast in approaches reveals everything. Perry needs this fight more than Nate does. Perry's building a boxing career and needs the win to establish legitimacy. Nate's already a legend. Win or lose, his legacy is secure. That desperation versus confidence dynamic is going to play out in the ring. And here's the thing about desperation. It can make you sharp, focused, dangerous, or it can make you reckless, emotional, vulnerable. The question is, which version of Mike Perry shows up on Saturday? The calculated striker who's prepared for a 5-round chess match? Or the emotional fighter who's been rattled by accusations and is trying to prove something to everyone watching? Because if it's the latter, Nate Diaz is going to exploit it. That's what he does. He finds the mental weakness, the emotional crack, and he pushes until something breaks. He's done it to bigger names and better fighters. And if Perry walks into that ring still thinking about the heckler in the crowd, still trying to prove he didn't take an easy fight, he's already lost the mental battle. So the real question isn't who wins on Saturday. The real question is whether Mike Perry can separate the noise from the performance. Can he ignore the accusations, ignore the narrative, and just fight his fight? Or will the weight of perception drag him down before Nate Diaz ever lands a punch? Because that's what this press conference revealed. Not who's the better fighter, but who's carrying the heavier mental burden. And in combat sports, that burden can be the difference between victory and defeat. Mike Perry chose this path. Now he has to prove it was the right choice, not just to the fans, not just to the media, but